Hey, 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 everyone. Welcome back to Strange Minds 6. I'm your host, Ruby, and today we're going to be getting back into the Octunnumi. But before we begin, I would like to give a great thank you to all of those who have liked, shared, and subscribed. It means a great deal to me. And I do have both of my puppies with me today, so if you do hear a little bit of barking or a little yips and such, please don't mind it. I am gonna try my best to edit most of that out, but you might still hear a little bit. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. The Octunnumi by Trevor Allen Forrest. Grab your snack, grab your drink, sit back, relax, and let's get to it. And the celebrations, ma'am? Gazing out over the merchant sector, from the wall of leaded glass and metal that forms the far side of the telegraph rooms, Margarine is momentarily lulled by the gentle hum of the monitoring team going about their work behind her as she considers the forthcoming event a logistical nightmare at the best of times. The annual festivities were as always to be hosted by the Octunnumi, and in light of the current situation, was the very last thing Margarine needed. With the majority of the access points unreachable, the arrival of so many dignitaries here was problematic in itself. Without the inevitable mass influx of festival goers, however, all of this paled into insignificance compared to the diplomatic headache that having so many heads of the instruments attending the one event at the same time provided, not least by the fact that they often refused to be in the same instruments, let alone the same room. Not that conflict was the issue here, far from it, just an extraordinary amount of competition. Who had the biggest instrument? Who had the biggest population? Who had the biggest... Well, you get the idea. This competitive streak, good-humored though it was, had on many occasions grown quite out of hand. The infamous "who has the biggest headdress" debacle resulting in 2 dislocated collarbones, a slipped disc, and the almost complete annihilation of the Individuum race. Only being some 5 inches tall, on tiptoes, they had the misfortune to be in the fallout area of the fantastical, over-the-top ensemble that was the headdress of the Leviates. As it toppled from the head of its leader during a particularly enthusiastic rendition of the can-can and some crashing to the floor. Being a point in case and the reason for the subsequent implementation of height and width restrictions on all headwear. glancing over images of the leaders due to attend suspended before her. Margarine scans the information, scrolling across the bottom of each, checking that their associated needs and requirements had been met. Being mostly benign requests for fresh water for the nymphs, oils for the mechs, Margarine was, however, quite sure some were just trying it on. She honestly failed to understand why anybody would need that amount of cake. Still, the Octunnumi is the place where everything is possible. Make it so, as her mentor used to say. So, making it so, she does. Satisfied that all is in order, Margarine turns her attention to the accommodation, glad that the collaboration between the Risians, Novenorts, and Taviriks had been established early on, ensuring that the size appropriation accommodation had been completed, ready to activate and furnish to suit each other's guests on arrival. Margarine had also made it quite clear that the collaboration team was entirely responsible for ensuring that the most competitive of instruments remained as far away from each other as possible. No, everything will be fine. The preparations have been underway for months. The decorations, the entertainment, canceling the Narustia's circus, always such a great event, would send shock waves through the instruments, many of which were so far unaffected. Nate's rampage has at least been contained, and his threat halted, if not stopped. No, even with the issues at hand, it will be fine. It will be fine, she says out loud, addressing Smith. Everything goes ahead as planned. But the access points, Smythe asks hesitantly, the layers will all have to go through the Octunnumi. She smiles at the young man. Establish a link to all instruments to come directly here. No layering, she says. But, and there will be complaints. She nods, placing her hand on his shoulder, guiding him back towards the Ampham Wind Lodge at the center of the room. But to enable safe passage to and from the other instruments, it's the only way. If an instrument can only be accessed by another layer, she pauses to study the multiple layers on display and continues, then they will need to be escorted here. Get me a list of those affected, would you? She smiles at the nervous Smythe. That could take some time. Oops, sorry. That can take some time, Theos states as he walks over to his wife. Thank you, Smith. He nods to the young man. It's Smythe. Smythe mutters as he walks away. Oh, and Smythe? Margarine calls after him, stressing the correct pronunciation of the boy's name while smiling at Theos. We have a week yet. Offer extended visits. See who would like to come early, would you? Yes, ma'am, he beams. In the meantime, she says, turning to Theos, we need to focus on connecting with the children and finding out what Nate is up to, Theos states. Oh, we know what he is up to. That's not the problem, Margarine says, returning to the deck and waving the leader's images away, to be replaced by Nate's face looming large over the room, smiling and waving as he sends a fireball hurtling across the landscape behind him. Finding him is... So, what's this? Theos queries, indicating the scene playing out before him. We are receiving regular updates on what he's doing and where he is, Margarine replies, closing the transmission. We can do that? No. Then? Nate. Nate? Yes, he's the one sending us the updates. How very helpful of him, Theos says. So, why haven't we stopped him? Margarine finishes, adding, because they are on a 30-minute delay. Oh. Yes, oh. Is there a pattern? No. And how is he getting around with the access points? Closed? Margarine notes. Don't know, she continues. I can only assume that seeing as the last place we saw him was the Hitherant, he can access everywhere from there, Theos mutters. So it seems. She nods. And can we get to the Hitherant? No. Which of course he knows, Theos says flatly. Yes, he does, she nods. The only saving grace is that he hasn't effectively trapped himself in the insomeds he controls. So, he can move between the same areas? Yes. But if he knows Fospit is here, out of reach, what is he doing? He indicates the last transmission. What is his movement? Madness, the professor calls from across the room as he enters. Has no motivation. Working his way toward the deck, leaning heavily on his stick while negotiating his way across the room, it becomes clear that the professor's aging has accelerated. The only redeeming factor in all of this, the professor continues, is that Bolivian will not ever rest. The sealing of his soul, yes, Margarine mutters. Stopping it. Edgar smiles and continues, ever finding peace, that torture is only for the truly evil. But with the latest information, are we sure that Bolivian was behind? Bolivian took those children, Edgar cuts in. Have no doubt, he made a deal with the Hitherant. If we are to believe the children are alive, Theos points out, then his plan failed. You were assuming that the intention was to kill them, old chap, Edgar says. Are you saying it wasn't? Margarine asks. Whatever happened, my dear? Edgar smiles smugly. It's safe to say that Bolivian was as trapped as the children. Justice, if you ask me. And you'd think Nathaniel knew of this. I'm afraid, my dear girl, he replies. There is no knowing the comprehension of a damaged mind, However you look at it, Nathaniel is just like his dear mother. Are you suggesting that he doesn't know what he is doing? Margarine asks. And he's just randomly going around destroying instruments? If his plan is to expose us, then why the destruction? Dios points out. It makes no sense. All he has really achieved is restricting movement, ours and his. As for his focus, there seems to be no pattern. Dios moves to the map, studying the images of Nate suspended above the areas that were under his control. With the exception of Fethris, flashing red and amber lights dominate all layers. There are very few green, but why has he not touched Fethris? He mutters. Take it as a blessing, Margarine says, joining him. Fortunately, we still have the live connection with them. For now, Fethris at least is unaffected. And we are still working on the assumption that Nate is actually pursuing Edgar. Theos asks, gesturing to the professor. I'd say so, yes, Margarine nods. The fact that Fethris is out of the equation would make sense, she continues. Edgar hasn't been to Fethris since. I do not believe this is Nate, Caddison interrupts. Stepping out of the shadows, despite her rapid aging, Caddison insisted that she be reinstated in her role within the Alliance continuity team. Her long white hair now pulled back, uniform immaculate. She continues, she gestures. I know it's him, indicating the images of her brother. I can see it's him, but this. Tears well and slip down her cheeks. This is not Nate. Unfortunately, my dear, Edgar explains, Nathaniel is displaying the same behavior as your mother. Thankfully, we managed to get her the help she needed before anyone was hurt. By help, you mean you locked her up and threw away the key. Caddison snaps. Tell me, why you didn't even go to her funeral? You do know how she died. She bleeped herself. I won't say the word. Her own poison. My dear, he goes to touch her. Don't come near me, she cries, backing away. How did she manage that, father? How did a mentally unstable woman get a hold of Caddison? Edgar cuts in sharply. Your mother was an expert in her field. There was nothing that woman didn't know about poisons and their antidotes. She dedicated her life to Fethris medicine. It can hardly come as a surprise that she would develop a means by which she would end her own life. I do not see how you can hold me accountable. Even in death, you take no responsibility, Caddison snaps. Edgar. Margarine gently touches his elbow. Could we speak privately? She asks, as she guides him away from Caddison. I think that may well be a good idea, Edgar replies, adjusting his tie. Well, now we have some background information on how Edgar's wife passed away and what she actually did in Fethris. It actually didn't mention her much in the beginning, but I'm glad that we actually know what's going on and know now that Caddison blames her father, just like Nate blames him as well. So there might honestly be a connection, or there might not. These are just my thoughts, and honestly, my thought is it might be the professor at the end of the day. Granted, Nate is doing all these horrible things, but who's to say that the professor wasn't the one that started it all? But that's just my idea. Leave your ideas down below. What do you think is gonna happen, and who do you think is truly, truly the mastermind that's like started all of this and that's behind all of it? Definitely let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. It would mean so much to me. And until next time, you guys, this is Ruby signing off. Laters.